Okay. So have you ever like imagined controlling VR just by like moving your wrist? Even if your hands are, hidden.
Yeah, it sounds pretty sci-fi, right?
It really does. But it might be closer than we think thanks to hand pose estimation.
Yeah.
But there's a catch.
Oh, yeah, for
The
sure.
current methods, well, they rely on cameras.
Right.
And as anyone who's tried to like take a good picture knows, cameras can be a little finicky.
They can be, yeah.
Think occlusions, lighting issues, you name it.
Yep, all that fun stuff. That's why researchers have been looking at different ways to like track these hand movements. And one of the most promising, I think, is using sensors. Sensors that can like read muscle signals right from your wrist. It's called sEMG or surface electromyography.
Okay, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
You actually sent us this really cool paper about it. It's called EMG2Pose, a large and diverse benchmark for surface electromyographic hand pose estimation.
Oh, wow, you got that whole title.
I did.
That's impressive.
Well, I have it right here. It's by Sasha Salter, Richard Warren, Colin Schlager, Adrian Spur, Shanshin Han, Rowan Bosson, Eugene Kai, Peter Walkington, Anna Bularinwa, Robert Wang, Nathan Danielson, Josh Merrill, Eftikios Mifmatikis, and Jesse Marshall.
Wow.
All from Reality Labs at Meta. What a team.
They're doing some really amazing work.
So what's the big idea?
So basically, they've built this like huge data set and benchmark, and it's specifically for hand pose estimation, but using sEMG. So it's kind of like a training ground for algorithms to decode muscle signals.
Yeah.
And then, they can figure out exactly how your hand is moving just from those signals.
Oh, I see. But why can't we just, stick with cameras?
Well, like you said, cameras have weaknesses.
Yeah.
They need a clear line of sight, right?
Yeah.
And our hands, they're always interacting with things, getting hidden or,
You're grabbing stuff, yeah.
Right. But sEMG sensors, they kind of bypass that. They're like listening to the electrical activity in your muscles. It doesn't matter if your hands are visible.
So it's kind of like having X-ray vision for hand movements.
Yeah, exactly. Like a superpower for tracking hands.
But reading muscle signals, that can't be easy, right?
No, it's definitely a challenge because muscle signals, they're not all the same. They can be different based on a person's body, where the sensors are placed, and even how they're moving their hand. So you need like a massive amount of data to train an algorithm that can handle all that variation.
Okay, so that's where this MD2Pose data set comes in.
Exactly. This data set, it's huge. We're talking 193 users, over 370 hours of data, and 29 different categories of movements. They call them stages.
29.
Yeah. And these stages, they range from simple stuff like counting on your fingers to more complex things like opening a door. They even have freestyle movements.
Oh, wow.
It's like the ultimate sEMG training ground.
But how do they even, collect all this data? And how do they know if, the algorithms are actually getting it right?
So they used this 16-channel sEMG wristband. It captures muscle signals. But here's the key. They also used motion capture, a really precise system with 26 cameras. That way they have a ground truth. They can compare the muscle signal predictions to the actual hand poses.
Clever. So it's like having a panel of judges, but for algorithms.
Exactly.
Okay, so they have all this data, 29 different categories, lots of users. It sounds like a lot to process. So how did they make sure they were testing these algorithms on, real-world stuff?
So get this, they designed 3 different test sets.
3?
Yeah. One tested the models on users it had never seen before. Another one used brand new types of movements. And then the final one, they threw in both new users and new movements, like a final exam.
A real challenge. So what were these algorithms even trying to, do? What was their task?
Okay, so there were 2 main tasks.
Okay.
Pose regression and pose tracking.
Okay, what's the difference?
So pose regression is kind of like, imagine trying to figure out exactly how someone's hand is positioned, but you can only feel the muscles in their arm.
Oh, that's tricky.
Right, because sEMG, it measures the muscle activity, not the pose itself.
I see. So it's like solving a puzzle, but you're missing half the pieces.
Exactly. Now, pose tracking is a little easier. The algorithm gets the starting hand pose, and it just needs to follow the changes. But, it still has to deal with those challenges we talked about. New users, new movements.
So it's still pretty tough.
Yeah.
All right, so they have the data, the tasks, the tests. What algorithms did they, put to the test?
Okay, so they tested 3 different models. First, there's EMG2Pose.
EMG2Pose.
Yeah. It's Meta's new model. brand new. This one predicts the changes in hand velocity, not just the static pose. So, it leads to smoother tracking, more natural.
Like capturing the flow of movement.
Yes, exactly. Then they also use EMG2Pose, that one's from previous research, and then sensing dynamics, another one, with a different approach. To evaluate them, they looked at how well the predicted joint angles matched the real ones and how far off the predicted fingertip positions were in 3D space, like how accurate they were.
Okay, so drum roll, please. How did these algorithms stack up?
Well, EMG2Pose, it was the winner.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it did better than EMG2Pose in sensing dynamics.
Impressive. But were there any, surprises?
Oh, yeah, definitely. While EMG2Pose did great overall, it wasn't perfect. When they tested it with both new users and new movements, remember that ultimate challenge, its accuracy dropped.
Ah, I see. So even with all that data, there's still room for improvement.
Oh, absolutely. And another thing, the accuracy varied between different users. Some people's signals were just harder to decode.
Oh, interesting. So it's like everyone has their own, muscle language.
It kind of is, and some are harder to translate than others.
Were there any movements that, really tripped them up?
They found that movements with the pinky finger were the most challenging. Those tiny muscles are tough. But here's something cool. EMG2Pose did amazing in situations where cameras would struggle.
Oh. How so?
It performed just as well even when the hands were hidden. Occlusion didn't affect it.
So it's like it can see through walls?
Not quite, but it can track movements when cameras can't see. Those limitations we talked about. EMG2Pose doesn't care.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Did they have any, visualizations to show this in action?
They did. Figures 1 and 5 in the paper, they show side-by-side comparisons. You can see the motion-captured hand movements and then EMG2Pose's predictions. It's actually really cool to see how close they are, even for, detailed finger movements.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
But were there any areas where the algorithms were still, struggling?
Yeah, a couple things. They noticed what they called angular drift. Basically, over time, the predicted joint angles would drift away from the true ones, and capturing those really fine movements from the small hand muscles, that's still proving to be a challenge.
I see. So there's still work to be done. But this EMG2Pose dataset seems like a huge step forward.
Oh, it is. It's a really valuable tool for developing and testing new algorithms for sEMG-based hand tracking. The size and the variety of the data are really pushing things forward.
It sounds like it. So we've talked a lot about the technical stuff, but why should we, care? What does this mean for, the average person?
That's a great question. This is about way more than just VR. It could change how we interact with tech in so many ways.
Like how?
Imagine controlling your smart home just by moving your wrist, even if your hands are full.
Oh, that would be cool.
Or surgeons, they could use sEMG to control robotic arms for really delicate procedures.
So this could actually, help people in real life.
Absolutely. And beyond that, this research is telling us more about the human body, how we can decode these complex signals. It's pretty significant. And that knowledge could be useful in other areas like robotics, prosthetics, even speech recognition.
Wow, that's amazing. So this one research project could lead to all sorts of advancements. That's really cool. We've covered so much. Maybe we should take a break and then come back to dig into those other implications.
Yeah, that sounds good. We've only just scratched the surface here. It's just wild to think all that information just from these tiny electrical signals in our muscles, it really makes you realize how connected everything is, our minds, our bodies, and how we move.
It's like our muscles are, sending out these secret messages. And now with sEMG, we're finally able to listen in.
Exactly.
But you mentioned earlier that this EMG2Pose dataset, it's comparable to some of the massive ones used in computer vision.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some context? How big are we talking?
Oh, it's huge. We're talking about 80 million labeled frames. That puts it right up there with the giants of computer vision.
Wow, 80 million. That's a lot of data.
It is. And keep in mind, those computer vision data sets, they usually use multiple cameras, high-resolution ones.
So they got the same level of detail, but just from wrist sensors. That's pretty impressive.
It really is. And with 193 participants, they've captured a good amount of that anatomical variation. The thing we keep talking about?
Right.
That scale, it's crucial for training models that can actually work for different people and different movements. It's like they created a Rosetta Stone, but for muscle signals.
I love that analogy. But it wasn't just about the quantity, right? They were pretty specific about the types of movements they included. Why was that so important?
Well, they wanted to make sure they included those movements that are notoriously hard for cameras to capture.
Oh, I see.
Like, think about reaching into a bag or, doing something behind your back.
Yeah, cameras would have a hard time with that.
Exactly. Or even just like clasping your hands together, cameras struggle, but sEMG, it can pick up those muscle signals, no problem.
So they were really trying to, like, push the limits, see what sEMG could do where cameras couldn't. Did they include anything else that would trip up a camera?
They did. They included stages where, the hands were interacting, like with each other or with objects.
Oh, that's interesting.
Those interactions are super tough to track, even for us.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's like trying to, like, follow a really complicated dance routine.
Exactly. It gets pretty tangled.
So how did EMG2Pose do with all that? Was it able to keep up?
It did pretty well. They found that it performed the same, whether the hands were visible or not. Occlusion, not a problem.
Wow, so no more worrying about cameras missing the action. What about those interactions? Did the algorithms get lost?
It's tough to compare directly across all those different movements, but overall, MG2Pose was pretty good. It could track hand movements, even with all the interactions.
So it's like EMG2Pose is saying, bring it on, I can handle it.
Right.
And this is really just the beginning, right? I mean, with more research, things could get even better.
Oh yeah, definitely. The accuracy, the robustness, all of that could improve.
But even now, it's pretty clear that EMG could revolutionize hand tracking.
I think so, yeah.
Imagine controlling your devices just by, like, flicking your wrist, even if your hands are full. It's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But, with any new tech, we have to think about the downsides too, right?
Oh, absolutely. As cool as this is, we got to be careful. One big concern is privacy.
Oh, right.
If we have devices that can always see our muscle activity, well, that data could be used for more than just hand poses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Think about it. Our muscles, they activate even when we're just thinking about moving.
So someone could, like, potentially know what we're thinking.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Yeah.
And it's something we need to be really careful about. We need, like, clear guidelines and rules to make sure this data is protected and used ethically.
Like, it's all fun and games until someone's reading your mind without you knowing.
Exactly.
Okay, so privacy is a big one. But let's talk about the good stuff again. You mentioned this research could impact more than just hand tracking. Can you tell us more about that? What other fields could this be useful for?
Oh, tons of them. Let's start with robotics. One of the hardest things is making robots that can move like humans, like with that same dexterity and fluidity.
Right, it's one thing to have a robot weld a car part, but it's a whole other thing to make it pick up a strawberry.
Exactly. And that's where sEMG could help. By understanding how human muscles work, we can make better algorithms for robots. Imagine robots that learn by watching us. They see how our muscles move and they adapt. They could become so much more helpful in all sorts of situations.
That would be huge for, like, manufacturing, healthcare, even search and rescue. What else?
Well, there's prosthetics. For people who have lost limbs, sEMG could give them more natural control over their prosthetics. Imagine a prosthetic hand that responds to, like, the tiniest muscle movements.
It's like giving someone a part of themselves back, letting them interact with the world in a way that feels more human.
Exactly. And as the tech gets better, those prosthetics could become even more advanced. They could do more with more precision. It's amazing to think about.
It really is.
Yeah.
And you mentioned speech recognition, too. How could sEMG be used for that?
Researchers are looking into using it to, like, decode the muscle activity involved in speech, especially for people who have lost their voice.
So instead of reading hand muscles, they're reading the muscles we use to talk. Could this help people who can't speak?
That's the idea. It's still early, but it has potential. Imagine communication devices that let people speak just using their thoughts and muscle movements.
That would be incredible. Breaking down those communication barriers. It's almost like something out of, like, a sci-fi movie.
It is, right. And it all started with hand tracking. It shows how powerful research can be. And it all comes down to people like the MG2's team, pushing the boundaries, exploring new ideas.
It's amazing how something that seems so specific can lead to so many different things.
It really is.
So we've talked about robotics, prosthetics, speech recognition, so much cool stuff. But are there any challenges left? I know we talked about privacy, but are there any technical hurdles that researchers are still trying to overcome?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges, and we've touched on this, is that everyone's anatomy is different.
Right, like we all have different muscles.
Exactly. And those differences, even small ones, they can really change how those sEMG signals, how they're generated and how we understand them.
So some people are harder to, like, read their muscle signals.
Kinda, yeah. And it makes it harder to build models that work for everyone.
So how do we fix that? Do we just need more data?
More data always helps, but it's not the only answer. Researchers are looking at different approaches.
Oh,
One idea is personalization.
personalization.
Yeah. So instead of one model for everyone, we tailor the model to each person.
So it's like custom fit,
Yeah,
but for your muscle.
exactly. It could be like a quick calibration. You wear the sensors, do a few movements, and the model learns your specific patterns.
So it learns your muscle language.
Exactly. That way it can be more accurate.
That makes sense. Are there any other ways they're trying to, improve the accuracy?
Another cool thing they're trying is combining sEMG with other sensors,
Oh, like what?
like IMUs, inertial measurement units.
Okay, what do those do?
They can track movement and orientation, so it's like adding another layer of information on top of the sEMG.
So it's like getting a more complete picture.
Yes. By combining all that data, they can hopefully make things even more accurate.
It's amazing how much they're doing with this. It seems so simple, muscle signals, but it's really complex.
It is, and the potential is huge, like we've been talking about. It could change so many things.
Yeah. It's not just about hand tracking. It's about, the future of how we interact with technology.
Exactly. A future where tech is more integrated, more intuitive.
I'm excited to see where it all goes.
Me too. It's a really exciting field.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. We've learned so much, from tiny muscle signals to, the future of humanity.
It's been a fun journey. It's amazing what you can discover when you just start asking questions.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new. And as always, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.